I'm with Dr. David Puder, everybody. Welcome to the podcast, Walk-ins Welcome. It's so good to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. Every sign I pass that says walk-ins welcome, I think of how I'm going to be on this podcast.
Heck yeah. See, my branding is working.
Yeah.
I'm like, what people don't realize is I picked this knowing that it was just going to be free advertising for me everywhere in the world.
Oh, wait, that's not your advertising? All those signs on the side of the street?
No, that's actually mine. That's where the entire Phetasy budget goes to every
Everywhere.
walk-ins welcome sign in America. Mm.
Nice.
Yes, I am excited to have you on because I became aware of you actually through my husband, who is a big fan of yours. He is a LMFT, and he basically got through his master's program listening to you and Dr. Jonathan Shedler, who you've done many podcasts with, who's been on this podcast as well. And he was like, "You've got to check these guys out. They're so sane." And he was saying right now before we recorded that he learned more from your podcast than he did in 2 years of getting his master's. He felt it was more helpful to him as a therapist than anything that he learned in school, and a lot of it was because he was saying that there was a focus on there was a lot more of a focus on an ideology as opposed to actually practicing psychotherapy and not having a lot of this kind of activism that is around and everywhere. And so he was like, I just want to learn how to, show up for a patient or a client and be present and meet them where they are and not go in there and be like, let's, after our land acknowledgement, let me talk about our structural difference in power. So he wanted me to pass along a big thanks for the work that you do.
Yeah, I don't know what that class or what that would be like. I think going through now with people who are, that people get focused on their political or sort of ideological ideas, and I tend to try to hide a lot of my personal opinions, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
the way I was trained. Just because I want people to show up who believe very different than me, and I want them to say whatever they believe, and I want to be it's like I can't watch too much politics, because then
Mm.
sometimes I feel like um my opinions might start to just bleed through.
Hmm.
Um, but I can only imagine what that would be like to be like if you're on one side of the spectrum and to have like a therapist who's on the other side, and how difficult that could be if the therapist is so passionate that they think that that's your problem,
Hmm.
you know?
Hmm. I had this happen to actually a lot of friends in Los Angeles during COVID and during the Trump years, 2016 to 2020, where they would go in and it would kind of be revealed that somebody in their family was MAGA or so. And I mean, I've tweeted about this, enraged. I was absolutely shocked at the things that were coming out of therapists' mouths to their patients, because I kind of thought that you were supposed to put that all aside. I've been seeing my therapist for a long time now, and the reason that it's so effective is because I know I can show up with anything and that she will not judge me. And it makes it so easy for me to maintain a level of honesty with myself in my life about what's going on that I absolutely need. I wouldn't wanna have to hide what is the point of therapy if you have to
'Cause
hide
yeah.
something from your therapist?
Yeah, it's like you go to therapy to try to find parts of yourself that probably are disavowed through different
Mhm.
childhood experiences or life experiences, like anger. um, for me was kind of disavowed, and so I have to learn in therapy how to find it. um, I found other places where it would come out through sports, through competition, but I did not have a conscious awareness of it until I did quite a bit of therapy.
Mm.
And
How long
so,
you
yeah,
Sorry, go
go ahead.
on.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just wondering how long you've been practicing when you're a psychiatrist. So I think I'm really interested in speaking to people in your field right now because there does seem to be, we've seen a lot of very high profile people being like, "Who needs therapy?" And it's like, "You." um, Probably you. But there seems to be a lot of backlash to therapy. There's obviously a lot of backlash to the kind of over medication of our society. I think you occupy a a large intersection here, and just even working with kids with autism and kids then kind of working with kids in Los Angeles who were just not even on the spectrum. They were just kind of had, I would say, probably parents who didn't really give them enough attention or whatever it might be. They were all on meds so young, and I would go with them to their psychiatry appointments, and I didn't realize that it wasn't really, and again, correct me if this is not accurate, but we would just show up for basically a 5-minute appointment where they would talk to them for a minute and adjust their meds, and then they'd leave. And I guess I didn't know that. I always thought you went in and had like a whole session with a psychiatrist. So, um,
Yeah,
I didn't
maybe.
realize they had been so separated.
Yeah, so maybe just because your audience doesn't really know me, probably. I feel like I've kind of like imagined what your audience is like because I've been trying to figure out that before coming on this podcast
Good luck.
and or
If you
Twitter
figured
friends.
it out, let me know.
Um, it's kind of like the independent thinker, um, someone who doesn't want to trust authority, wants to know what is real or not real, not based on authority, right? So, and I'm probably like that myself to some degree. Like I always question, you know, every new thing I learn. I'm like, okay, I don't want to be brainwashed just because someone said that. I want to like figure out why that's the case.
Mhm.
Okay, so I'll take you through. I went to UC Berkeley for 4 years. I
Okay.
was a rower, athlete, a molecular and cell biology major, and then I went to medical school for 4 years, and then I went to a transitional year, which was largely internal medicine for 1 year. Met my wife, and then I spent 3 years in psychiatry residency,
Jesus.
and then I spent 2 years. My first 2 years of my practice, I spent going to a psychoanalytic, psychodynamic, kind of like Shedler, but Shedler I
Yeah.
think went to a longer one. I went to a 2 year one in Santa Monica, and now I've been practicing 11 years, around 11 years. So I've been seeing patients since this third year of medical school, fourth year of medical school. You're seeing patients 40 to 60 hours a week. So I've been seeing patients for a lot longer than I've been practicing. So
Mhm, mhm.
that's the unique thing about psychiatry. So in psychiatry, which is you know largely kind of the insurance companies have pushed things to shorter visits. Just like um, it's like it's a joke. I because I've practiced both ways. I practiced with insurance. Now I'm cash pay. Insurance, I would get like a $40 check from an insurance company for like a first patient encounter, which is like $40. Like
Mhm,
with my level of education is kind of a joke, right?
mhm.
So I can see why people have been pushed to see patients faster and faster over the years. It used to be very normal for psychiatrists to see patients for an hour for new patients, half an hour for returns. That's changed over time in the last probably 20, 30 years. That's changed where now it's very normal for psychiatrists to see four patients an hour. That's pretty
Right,
normal. Um, and so I would say my practice was different because I decided early on I was really interested in psychotherapy, which kind of made me this weird person graduating from psychiatry residency because there were no jobs that wanted to pay me to do therapy. The VA
right,
didn't want me to do therapy, the county, the Kaiser. So essentially, I had the option of going private practice or the university. I decided to go university just because I had some good mentors there. They were gonna allow me to co-teach with my mentor, guru therapist, who was like 90 years old, who passed last summer, who was just phenomenal. Like he was like the Yoda of psychotherapy. And so
What
I
was
got
his
to
name?
Dr. John Tarr, and I got to hang out with Dr. Tarr for like 4 hours a week for the past 10 years. And that's
Wow.
so, yeah, I took a huge pay cut to do psychotherapy. Now I'm doing fine because people are willing to pay for good psychotherapy. But, um, okay, so largely though, when you're in psychiatry residency, you are seeing the most ill of the most ill.
Right.
Okay. So we had a catchment area of millions of people coming to our ER, coming to the VA and coming to Loma Linda ER. I mean, very sick patients, every single one, psychotic, suicidal, homicidal. And we would see those people all night long, 8 to 10 people a night. I would be doing a full history and physical on when I was on overnight call. So you're working 60 to 8 hours a week in the psychiatric hospital, multiple different ones that we would do.
Wow.
And and so I would see the most sick of all most sick patients. And I did that for the first 2 years of residency. The third year residency, you start seeing outpatients and you
Mm.
start doing psychotherapy. And so that's not how MFTs or like psychologists trains. They usually start off seeing someone who's mildly or moderately depressed or anxious in the outpatient setting. Now, maybe with
Mm.
COVID, it's a little bit more severe, but usually that's how they start. Here's 10 patients. Here's your caseload. Here's 20 patients. This is your caseload. Um, Whereas in like psychiatry residency, it's like you see really, really ill people. And so
Yeah.
sometimes when I see the anti psychiatry crusaders online, I look at their degree, I look at what their training is. None of them have started in a psychiatric hospital. They're
Mhm.
not
Mhm.
seeing like patients with catatonia. No one who sees a patient with catatonia um, is thinking to themselves, like, gosh, they just need therapy.
What's catatonia for those who don't know?
It's like they'll stop eating and drinking.
Mhm.
Their thought process will get delayed. So now they respond with like 5-second pauses before they say anything. They start speaking slowly, Dr. Puder, and you're like
What
trying to
causes
get a
this?
history. It's a real so there's multiple common pathways to catatonia. So you can have
Okay.
depression, you can have schizophrenia, you can have bipolar, but this is just very severe damaged brain, right?
Mhm.
That
Mhm.
is it's like the worst of the worst, right? So you in a psychiatric, I was thinking about this with like your, kind of the anti-psychiatry movement, right? It's like, okay, open up your clinic to see catatonic patients, videotape them before and after your treatment. You're not going to.
Yeah.
You're absolutely not going to. There's been anti-psychiatry people who have been on Joe Rogan, one in particular, I'm not going to say her name, but she has a bougie clinic that charges $120 an hour for first encounters and screens out people that won't do extreme um, diet changes and then isn't accepting any patients anymore. And it's like, that's the kind of option that often you get relegated to with people who have like a huge brand presence
Right.
and they're not seeing like county
Right.
VA patients with severe mental illness.
They're not seeing the Joker.
The Joker, oh my gosh, I did, yeah. The Joker is yeah, it's kind of like the mood that the Joker put me in is like what it's like to be in someone who's like got severe depression, schizophrenia, just the direness, it's just
Mhm.
like you can't
Mhm.
see the sky. The
Mhm.
music is foreboding. It's like you feel just the despair and the
Yeah.
agony
Yeah.
of being in this guy's head.
Yeah. I've been in mental wards, when I first got sober because there's a lot of mental illness in
Yeah.
my family. They didn't know where to put me, so instead of putting me in a rehab, they put me in the mental ward, and I was there for 3 days, and realized pretty quickly, like, no, I'm not crazy. I'm an addict. Like there's a very there sometimes they overlap, often they overlap, but in my case, it was like, get me the heck out of here. And it was really, again, that darkness and despair and growing up with it in my family, just around all the time and being kind of under the shadow of someone who's always suicidal and somebody who's always in and out of mental wards and I'm pretty familiar with that darkness. When I saw Joker 2, I was like, "Oh, I know." And even being in addiction at the bottom, bottom, bottom of the many rock bottoms I've experienced, I'm also familiar with that. I don't know that I think people are, a lot of people, but I do think there are shades of it. There's definitely degrees where
Mm,
everything is relative, everyone has their problems, but then there is this kind of darkness that you experience in these kinds of, and it sounds like your residency and all where you're seeing just the sickest of the sick, and that I've been around, and
mhm.
it's just different. It's different than having, like, a mom that's kind of quirky and messed up.
Yeah, and I would say I don't know if I could do inpatient work year round. I would
Yeah,
cover on the weekends, and I would go in and see 30 patients, per day on the weekend, and I would spend short amounts of time with each person, where, like, I could feel part of what they're feeling, and I would
yeah,
leave absolutely destroyed.
yeah,
I remember as a medical student without any training. So a lot of people who are empathic, who have no training, they'll say something like, "I could never sit with depressed people all day long because I would just feel so depressed." And I usually tell those people like, "Well, it takes training, like it's a
right,
muscle."
right.
Um, but when I was a medical student, I remember I got like suicidal thoughts that would enter into my head, which, like, it's not something I struggle with. But when I
Right.
would sit with these people who are very suicidal, and I didn't really know what to think of that, and I asked a resident, like, "What do you do when you're feel like, is this weird that I'm having these thoughts? I've never had these thoughts before, for a good decade." And maybe when I used to wrestle, I used to like hate it so bad. Some days I would like quite have a couple fleeting thoughts,
Right.
um, but like I was like, what do I do with this? And he said to me, just you thinking that you're feeling this because of them and you're picking up something, just now you're integrating your brain a little bit, and that's helpful. And
Mm.
it's like, so we have this ability, the more empathic you are, the more your brain lights up in a similar way to the person in front of you, which, by the way, I can tell you have high affective empathy just from your how you interact with people.
Mm.
Um, but what this does is your brain lights up like their brain. And so, if you're very empathic, you're probably going to be a good therapist, but you're probably also going to need to learn how to cope with like all of those negative affects or foreign
Mhm.
thoughts that will come into your head during a session.
Yeah, it's gotta be so crazy what you have to hold. The amount of information that you're taking in, and I think it is so valuable to have people. I've found therapy incredibly valuable. There's no way I would be alive. There's just no way. I mean, maybe I would be alive, but I don't think I would be remotely as functioning and so much of the work we did, it's she's seen me through, so that's the other benefit of working with someone long term, because I've just kind of kept her around, and she's not somebody who would even necessarily, I think a lot of people are like, "Oh, they just get you on the hook forever." And I'm like, "Well, no, I need her in my life just to." Especially getting sober, I had no baseline. I think when people show up in therapy, it I don't know that I had ever known what just my baseline normal existence was because I started using drugs and drinking so young. And I think if it's just like I needed her to see me in like those boring good times too. I couldn't
Yeah,
just go be like in crisis. I needed to
right.
sometimes show up and be like, well, there's not much actually. Things are pretty good after, and it feels weird, but it's like she also needed to see me when,
Or when you're succeeding, or to get
yeah,
excited for you when you're doing well,
yeah.
and that your achievements,
Yeah, I think
and it
people think you have to be, like, crying and upset in every therapy session, and it's just that has not been my experience over a long period of time.
yeah, if you hinted that your parents, had some sort of, like, mental health issues, so the house was
My a
fairly
step.
chaotic?
Yeah, mhm.
Yeah, so
Not a biological. Well, yeah, it's a long story, but yeah.
so I imagine that she is kind of like a stability force that wasn't there, right? That's gotten integrated over time, that it's like it goes with you.
It's so sad. Not sad, it's just so crazy how even with the amount of therapy and stuff that I've done, and this is why I kind of push back against the, like, anti-therapy people. There will be something that's coming up over and over again, and I'll be feeling insecure about something, and then it will come out in therapy like, "Oh, could it be that this is just because it's triggering this, like, deep-seated thing that was very traumatic, and you are trying to get validation from this person because," and I'm like, I can't. It's like you said, once you are, incorporating your brain into this, it was like I couldn't unring that bell when I saw it, and now that when that insecurity pops up, I have so much more knowledge, like, "Oh, I know what you are." It's not it's hard to explain without being specific, but it's like
Yeah.
that I would have been able to get to that place on my own. You can't get outside of the matrix that is your own mind.
Yeah.
In my experience, again, I don't know, maybe some people can. I find that I'm very I don't know, I think we're all pretty good at lying to ourselves.
So okay, so this is, if you were to not be in therapy, then you may act upon that, impulse to, make that person happy,
Mm,
and that could drag you into situations further and further from what's best for you and your family,
mhm,
and I think a lot
mhm,
of people get pulled into abusive situations long term like that, or cults, and because it's like they're getting something good, but then it's like more and more is taken from them as time goes on.
mm,
And so you have unconscious material, like trauma from your past, attachment relationships from your past, which is informing those decisions. You becoming conscious of those things, and more empathic towards yourself for having those things there, right? So it's like we don't want to like just bring it out just to feel shame that it's there. We want to ideally like feel like, well, of course, it's adaptive for me to make other people happy who are powerful, because that
mhm,
was like a way of coping with reality. And I don't need to do that. I have a choice. So it gives you
mhm,
more choice. This is my argument for free will, or progressive will, as I like to think of it. It's like we may not, more, some people will be more driven deterministically by their past unless they do deeper work where they can now start to have some more choice. And that choice is probably progressive. Like when you were, if when we at times may have been intoxicated, we have less free will to make a true choice. When we're sober, we have more choice. If
mhm,
you if people go on and drink for a lifetime and they get hepatic encephalopathy, they have even less choice. Now their brain cannot think properly,
yep.
where there is no end to like something that seems like a dementia, where like they're just not able to remember that they 10 minutes ago decided that they were going to stop drinking.
Yes, I'm familiar with that that feeling. Do you what do you I mean, I wonder too, like, how is it because places like Twitter, where I observe you and take in all your content, they're like an online mental ward. It's like, don't you feel like you're logging into don't you feel like you're going back to the clinic every time you log in to X or Twitter or whatever? I mean, how do you deal with looking around? What do you make of this? I am kind of 2 minds of it about, like, I know you are much deeper into the research than I am, of, like, teenagers are more depressed than ever, girls are more insecure. Is this a moral panic? I know coming up, everybody was like, video games and all of these, the boob tube, they're all gonna be special needs kids because they're atrophying their brain. And you could probably argue that that might have borne out. But what do you make of kind of where we're at societally right now, as somebody who's been doing this for a long time? Do people seem worse than ever, or is it how are you
I
feeling about it?
COVID definitely was a hit. Like,
Mhm.
people got more anxious. I've never seen so
Mhm.
much anxiety. I've never seen so many people who were maybe doing fine for years start to get a little bit, yeah, just panic, right? And I think COVID itself, like, I remember having COVID, and I remember, like, logically, I knew I was probably gonna be okay, but I had consumed so much media about it that I myself had panic, like, "Oh god, am I gonna die of
Mm.
this?" Um, and there were some, dark nights of the soul, wrestling, like, "How bad is this gonna be?" Um so I think that there is something going on there. I think with social media, I call it unsocial media, or it's only 5% social. So only 5% is like real meaningful engagement. And I don't think it's like media that is um like, is media the great evil, right? Are screens the great evil? Maybe it's like what we're not doing. So there's this one paper that I looked at in particular, like, when you go beyond 2 hours of media time per day, screen time per day, kids' mental health decayed. Now, if you went under
Mm.
30 minutes, mental health decayed. So some kids who have no access, it's actually maybe, a little bit worse. I mean, if parents want to be like like, I'm probably going to be the parent that doesn't let my kids have a lot of access to social media.
Do you have
Um,
kids?
I have an 8 and a 10-year-old, and you have what,
Oh,
a
okay.
2-year-old? Is that how old is your
She's 2, yeah.
2? Okay. So, yeah, at 2
Are
hours or
you one of
less.
those, like, no screen time people, or what? Do you let them watch movies?
We play a lot of Minecraft, and,
Mhm.
they watch a lot of Minecraft YouTube. Like,
Mhm.
they are and, like, I will literally play with them. We play, like, PvP Minecraft, and,
Mhm.
we're talking about, like, half an hour to an hour a day max, right? And, so we all have, like, our little stations next to each other, and we, like, really enjoy
Cute.
it. But during the school week, we do less. So we may, like, say for, like, last year, it was like no screens on the school days. And so I like to get them reading, like to get them exercising. Um,
Yep.
okay. But the study said after 2 hours, like, suicidal thoughts went up, depression went up. And the
Right.
question is, like, okay, are these the depressed kids that are just on their screens more?
Right.
Right. And this really interesting study showed what they weren't doing. They weren't doing exercise stuff. They weren't doing religious activities like they used to. They weren't doing, like, all of these normal places where they interact and have social engagement. That was not there. So I think that's a big component as well. It's like, as a parent, finding meaningful places for my kids to connect with other kids in a healthy way is, like, crucial.
Yeah. It's stressful too.
It takes
It's
energy.
it does take a lot of energy. It does. I'm now entering into this phase of, like, beyond the beyond the little, I don't know, she's entering into, like, wanting friends and just wanting she's lights up around people, and yeah, takes energy. I do wonder too, because and this goes back to the question I was kind of asking earlier, do you feel like people are over-medicated?
So, yes. And in a very short answer, I would say yes, and I would say it's complicated. And then I would say, like, okay, once again, I am a psychiatrist who enjoys psychotherapy. I wish
Mhm,
all patients started with psychotherapy. I would say exercise is
mhm.
number 2. Like, exercise is so powerful. Like,
So
but
powerful.
but it's so hard to get people to do. Okay?
Why is this?
Because depressed people just want to lay in their beds all day. Like, the serious depressed people
No,
that I
I
see,
know.
I ask them to pull up their iPhone. Now, people have their iPhone on them at all times. I ask them to pull up the health app. Okay, so if you're right now and you're wondering, pull up your health app. It tells you how many steps you've taken per day.
Mhm.
Okay,
I
so pull up
know.
your health app. Tell me what you got.
Mine? 5,000.
Okay, depressed people, it's like 1,000.
I feel like that's high.
1,000. And it's like, no, 1,000, you can get 1,000 by like getting out of bed and going to get your food 4 or 5 times
Yeah, I don't
and
always
going to the
have
bathroom.
my phone on me actually, so I feel like I brought it with me on my I go on a walk every morning,
Yeah,
and then I always go on a walk in the afternoon. I try to, like, get them, but I bet it would be more if I had a Fitbit or something where I'm counting, like, every
yeah,
step through my house and chasing my toddler around and all that, but
right. Yeah, so
yeah.
5,000, it's like you're halfway through the day, you're at 5,000. That's like you're an active person. It probably get to 7,000, 8,000 by the end of the day, right? But what I've found is that really depressed people, they when you look at the amount of steps per day, and when they started to get depressed, it just goes down and down and down and down.
Wow.
Like, they just stop moving.
I definitely notice I can see that even with me, and I'm not necessarily a depressed person, but I can see that the years where I've been more depressed or down or whatever than other years, the steps also follow that trend. It might
Okay,
be very
so
slight, but it's just slightly down than the year prior, or this year's up than the year prior, and I feel overall a general sense of optimism. More optimistic.
I've been lifting weights for like 6 years. Like,
Mm,
very conscientiously,
I just started.
I do something called starting strength, um, barbell logic starting strength. It's like squat, deadlift, bench press, 3
Mhm.
sets of 5. And I think that it is like how to get strong. You do 3 sets of 5, you increase your weight 5 pounds each every other workout, and you can run that for a couple months. You
Wow.
could get really strong very quickly. Um, when COVID hit, I didn't have my gym partners coming to my house anymore because I was in California at the time. I know we're
Are
both
you still in
California
California?
exiles. No, I'm in Florida.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's another story. So, so they stopped coming to my workout. So I was working out by myself, and I like lost energy to do it. So I got an online
Mm.
trainer, and I did that for about a year and a half, and then I lost energy to do it. And I found like a local gym. Luckily, a good one is here in Orlando, and I've been lifting there for a couple of years. But I have an external environment that I go to that encourages me towards my goal. So sometimes we don't have the energy to do it by ourselves, like go to the gym, make our own workout, like execute it, right? I don't think very many people have that ability. Like, when I tell a patient to do it and they do it, it's like we're talking about like 1 out of 20 people is like that.
Wow.
Like, super high conscientious people uh, will do that. Okay. Most people need an environmental shift. They
Mm.
need a class. They need a group of friends to say, we're going to do this together. They need that environment. They can choose the environment.
Getting in shape can be hard. Everybody knows this. It requires hard work, discipline, and in my instance, someone to be accountable to. And that's why I'm excited to partner with Caliber. It has been truly life changing for me. Caliber is a strength training and nutrition coaching program that's completely personalized to you. Through their app, you get paired with a personal trainer, an actual person, not AI, and they put you on a fitness program and also help out with your nutrition. In my instance, she looked at me and was like, you need double the protein you're getting, and we're going to start with weights 2 to 3 times a week. And she tailored that to my needs, what my time is, like where I'm at. It's freaking amazing. It actually has been life-changing for me. I see my body composition changing. I also feel different. And my brain feels so much better just even eating more protein. Like that alone has been a godsend. We've arranged a special deal for our Walk-Ins Welcome listeners and viewers. If you go to caliberstrong.com/walk-ins, go to that link, you get $100 off your first 3 months, and you get a 30-day money-back guarantee. So click the link below to get signed up, caliberstrong.com/walk-ins. I'm getting so strong! I am getting strong. Are you dealing with an HMO like I am? If you want any testing done, you have to go make an appointment. And then if you need a specialist, you've got to go to a specialist. And it's a whole rigmarole. Not anymore, folks. Quest simplifies this process. I can purchase my own lab tests online and test for a multitude of health issues I might be concerned about, and then take those results to my doctor, better armed with the information I need. Not just a doctor, by the way. Like, I'm going to take mine to my acupuncturist. At questhealth.com, you can get hundreds of tests across several different categories. You can do a full blood work panel. There's male panels, female panels. There's perimenopause panels. There's panels, STD screenings, allergies, heart health, hormones, sexual health, etc., as I was mentioning. These are lab quality tests. They're the same ones you'd be given at your doctor's office. Use the affiliate link below for a 25% discount and order your test, and then visit a nearby Quest Diagnostics location for sample collection. Again, use the affiliate link below for a 25% discount and prioritize your health today with lab work on your terms. I was thinking like 12 different things at once. Like I was thinking about, actually, I have a writing coach and he's very hardcore. And I just started working with him again after my dog died. But he always, it sometimes feels like therapy because I've got to be a pain in the ass to coach. But I've also started this new app started sponsoring us, and they gave me a trial, and I'm like, I need to do weights. And it has been like life-changing for me. So I'm one of those people that doesn't necessarily need an environment change, but I do very well if I'm accountable to somebody and it's like, okay, check in with me when you complete this, or and I'm also very good if someone's like, here's what you need to do when you need to do it. Just if someone lays out like, here are the workouts you need to do this week, and you can do them 3 days a week. There's some flexibility if you need to move them around, but this is what you need to do. And then we're going to check in with each other at the end of the week. So for me, and I can do that from here, but he's been forcing me to leave the house to do writing sessions. And I was like, it's wasted driving time. And I did it this week, and it was life-changing. It's like, damn it, he was right.
Stephen King on writing, a book he wrote, a memoir. So good. So good. And he talks about creating that writing space, that sacred writing space. And I have not found that nirvana level yet. Plus probably because I have kids and I'm seeing patients, 30 to 40 hours a week.
See, my coach would tell you that's an excuse.
I would say another one of my favorite books is The War of Art.
Mine too. Yep.
Okay.
Sit your ass in the chair.
And so I would be like, absolutely, I'm full of excuses. Like,
resistance.
There's so much resistance to doing good art, doing
and working
stuff
out
that is really close to what is beneficial to yourself and also beneficial to society and your family. And that is the closest art, like the most beautiful art, that there's going to be tons of resistance.
But see, around the working out and this whole conversation is like lighting me up because that's something I have contemplated for so long. I do not understand why this would be so difficult for us. It seems like we should be chasing those things, that they should come easily. I do not understand this. I always joke, like, if I was going to kill myself, that I would say, Darwin, like, take that, like, fuck you, Darwin, basically, would be my suicide note, because it does not make sense to me on any kind of
Right.
evolutionary, everything we know about survival of the fittest and all of this stuff. Like, the self-destructive bent of humans is something I could study for the rest of my life, and I don't understand it from a just, like, evolutionary perspective.
Well, I think we have things that trick our sort of natural drives, right? So porn tricks the natural drive for sex and intimacy and closeness. Violent videos trick the natural desire for conquest or drive, right? Um, you know, there's a reason why the majority of the internet are are those two things, right? And we see that in Twitter, like a bunch of aggressive people who like probably don't work out, who get on, do some angry tweeting, and they feel protected behind their screen. They would never say those things in real life, right? They would never just say to my face like, "You're an idiot." Um,
Yeah. But still,
it's
why is it so hard to get out of our own way? Like, for instance, why is it so hard to get to
entropy.
go work out?
Entropy. We, like just the basic driver of like things fall apart. It's harder to put energy into something, right? For a long
Mhm.
term goal. It's easier to do something that is instantaneously gratifying, and so the seduction of video games or all of those other things, it's like the instant gratification without the hard work. But without the hard work and without something real at the end of it, there's a nihilism that comes in as well, though there's a meaninglessness.
Yeah.
um, and usually, things that used to be pleasurable were paired with like you have to work really hard to get to those things, right? um, and now it's like you can get a lot of those things pretty quickly. Like food used to be pretty hard to come by.
Right. It does seem like we kind of went from things being very hard, and I don't know how much people didn't have the time to sit around and talk about they weren't thinking about life being meaningful. They weren't even thinking they often couldn't even, self-actualize because you're just trying to survive. We got to this point where things became more convenient, but now it's almost like we've just blasted past it to, like you're saying, this kind of point of entropy where everything is so easy that now we're just self-destructing. I don't
Well,
know.
and I think, well, the history of humanity is finding meaning in things. And like the pyramids didn't get built by people who didn't believe in it. Like these people were believing that they were doing something that was like incredibly important, and
Mhm.
working together with a lot of humans to do things that is incredibly important is very, it's amazing. A lot of people come out of the military and they say things like, "I just feel like there's no meaning in life. I was doing this thing with my band of brothers that was
Mhm.
life or death, and we are on this quest together, and then I come home and everyone's like talking about, you know, stuff that's just like so benign."
Yeah, like Stanley Cups and you're I just imagine these guys, like, at a barbecue after they get back, just everybody's chit-chatting about, the, like, "Oh,
The
the like, I like"
Kardashians
yeah, and
or
you're like,
Taylor
"I
Swift.
I
Who's Taylor
can
Swift
see
dating? Like, oh, she wrote a song. She's gonna write a future song about a
I
breakup,
can
you know?
see why the rates are as high as they are. I mean, it makes me semi wanna be like, "Go get me out of here," and I wasn't, fighting a war somewhere and under duress and fighting for something I believed in and then only to come back and think that it's meaningless and
Oh,
nobody
and
appreciates you and
oh,
you,
and that's the difference between World War II and starting in the Vietnam War, pretty much every war that's
mhm,
come after, is people came from home from World War II on a boat. It took them weeks to get back, and when they came, they were celebrated.
mhm,
People came home from Vietnam in one day, were straight back to where they came from, and people were spitting on them. I mean, like,
yeah,
like the meaninglessness, it's like it's just instantaneous right there, right? And so, how many people think, oh, we shouldn't have been in a lot of the wars we've been in,
Oh,
and so
yeah.
it's incredibly disorienting, I think, for people who just risk their life for years,
Mhm.
to be told this thing is meaningless, and maybe it is, and that's like very disorienting.
I mean, it's appropriate we're talking on 9/11 because I think a lot of the people I've talked to so many guys and in my comments and heard from them and my email and the politically homeless people. I hear this story over and over. I got into the military after 9/11, and then it was like we were in a war all these years, and then it ended up being pointless, and I lost all these friends, and now I came back, and it's like, yeah, that has been the case, and I think about my grandfather who was in World War II, and he did come back a hero, it's true, but he was also this is interesting because it was they didn't even have words for PTSD. So he was still struggling with everything that he saw and endured and just basically drank because he didn't
Mhm.
there so those guys came back heroes, still with tons of PTSD, which was not even called that at the and no help. So it was like, "Yay, you're a hero," and then just went on and had families and never dealt and, never really had any support dealing with what they went through in war.
They felt, if you look at videos of like the bodily symptoms of PTSD, they were a lot worse back then because there were no
Mhm,
words for things. So
mhm.
their gait would change. There was a lot more functional movement issues, and
Oh,
you would
interesting.
and their body would carry the torturous realities of war.
Right.
And having sat with a lot of people who've been through war, it's like it's not the stories they want to tell you. It's the stories they don't want to tell you.
Right,
It's the
right,
stories they don't want to tell to themselves.
right.
They need a home for those things, and they need someone who's non-judgmental. And they need, and a lot of it's moral injury. I think actually moral injury is vastly more complicated to deal with. And I think what we're talking
Mm.
about is moral injury. If they come back and then they have a disillusionment with the government, or why we made the decisions we made, or what corporations have interest in things, and we want to believe that what we're doing is for good and for reasons, and then we learn like, oh, are we being manipulated to believe or think certain things that we believe and think or do, and that that in and of itself can cause a moral injury of sorts, where then it's like the traumas and the losses that you're talking about are that much more harder to make sense of.
Yeah, this is again something that's so fascinating to me. Even you post something, and I'm sure I'll write a stand-up routine about this, but you post something in earnest about 9/11, and then my mentions are just like it's wild. Everything from people telling their stories to your sociopath to people to like, well, they didn't fall down, they were there was demolition and
Right.
this was just an inside job and um
The earth is flat, and therefore
it's the Jews, like it's wild. I'm like, this is absolutely, and I kind of have this routine that I've been working on for years that I'm actually going to aggressively work on now, where it's
okay.
like all roads lead to 9/11 is an inside job on the internet. Like no matter
Okay.
where you start, if you spend too much time online, eventually you end up somewhere in the truther space and you're like, how did those towers fall down to? And that's when you're like, okay, get off the internet. Time out. But I do think there is now we just live in that space. It used to be like all roads lead to that, but now it's just that's
Okay.
the world we live
So
in.
so let's say there's someone listening to this and they're thinking to themselves, "Yeah, I've lived in that space. I've thought hundreds of hours about that, and
And I know it's true.
I've gotten totally, you know, um, enraptured in this kind of like worldview where I'm like, I question everything and I question authority. And if that were my patient and I was trying to look for meaning, I would try to look at like, well, what are the values that you've started to believe because of that? Well, I
Interesting.
believe in the values of truthfulness, and I believe in the values of doing good that is actually good. And I believe in the values of not hiding from my kids, the truth about things. Or I believe, so it's like, okay, then what do we do with those values? How do we live different? You know? And so, oh, well, if I live different, like, well, how can we make an impact in the world with those values? Like how would you live a life that is meaningful for your family with a sense of the values, knowing that there are things that we can't change, right? So, for example, I was thinking about like, okay, I really don't talk politics, but I'll say this. I don't think politics is going to change your life that much.
Mhm.
Like on the big picture of things, like I just don't think like the nuts and bolts of like, can you tell me like in the last 4 years how the Biden Harris presidency changed your specific life? You know, like, but we put an inordinate amount of energy there and focus. And then I would say like, well, what about what if the focus is put on to, you know, like building your friends and family and your network and your,
Mhm.
the things that are like going to actually lead to thriving. Because I can see people get in these like echo chambers where then they focus on this and all this is all they focus on, which like I'm sure
Totally.
like spend a little bit of time, make your decision, move forward, like, but then where can you actually make a change in the world, right? Like where,
Yeah,
like,
but it's much easier to just, like, spend time online and be mad. And be like, "The I'm being a," I think that
could that be
what's
a form of resistance though to
of
doing,
course.
remember, coming back to like the hardest things to do are the things that like grab your heart the most. I mean, and I would say like if you come out of there and you're like, "Hey, I'm going to run for Congress." Okay, go do it. Try to cut the deficit. Um, you like go for it. The but like what is the thing that's the closest to them and their values that they need to actualize? And maybe for you it's writing your book. I hear, maybe that's like the thing that's like all this distraction is coming at, all these like negative tweets.
I'll find a million ways to procrastinate on that. I'm a master. I can make it look very constructive because I'm not like a person who can just hang out. I get too restless and I just have too much of a restless spirit in general. So I can't just hang out, but I can completely bury myself in doing a lot of things that make me look busy so that it's really like, well, I'm not distracting myself. I'm just very busy with all of this other stuff. So it's just a way of hiding. I don't, I think that's why working with this coach has been good.
That's good.
Again, because they force me, I'm only allowed to work on one project, this one specific project for a specific amount of time, and then I take my walk, and then I have to work on comedy for a certain amount of time, but
Oh,
now that I've
wow.
been starting my day every morning with fiction, which is what I got into, like, this is what I
Oh,
wanna do, is
okay.
write stories. Because this
Yeah.
is what I was saying to my friend yesterday. We were talking about how we were both doing like live tweeting and he was at this other place and he had to go comment and I'm like, we were just like, oh god, this like here we I don't I'm like, we're not telling stories, we're just like reacting to politics, and it feels so toxic to me. And I moved to LA so that I could be a screenwriter. Like I wanted to write, I have whole worlds that I want to build and have built in screenplays that I've written. And now I'm
Okay.
just reverse engineering them into fictions because I was like, why didn't I write these as stories? Like I'm a writer first. And so I do feel enormously different, um, starting my day and signaling to the universe or to whatever that like these are my priorities, because again, it was easy. I started telling jokes online and then kind of found my way caught in the crossfire of the culture wars. And I'm like, I don't want to be a pundit. I don't know any, I never wanted to, like, I can make fun of and mock and joke and poke fun of, but I really, like, I love stand up in ways that I've really had to fully accept. And I probably could have pivoted into like making a lot of money as just a talking head and making jokes. But the minute I got back on stage, it was like, uh, this is different. This
Really?
is like you're connecting to people. You're
Oh,
in real life having
yeah.
that real
Mirror
time.
neuron.
Yeah, but
You
also just it's like a crazy, I don't know. I really just love the audience so much. I love being able to, I know that they're all taking what I'm saying and they're interpreting it through their lens. It's just like wild to me that I get to do that. And then when that first laugh hits you, it's just like
yeah,
I am awash with
dopamine.
gratitude and
Yeah.
love and God, or whatever.
Okay.
And yeah, so that's been really helpful, I think. And it was
That fired
something
you
where
up.
I'm like, everything feels out of control. The world feels out of control. And like you said, like I can wake up and focus on this and justify it and say, "Oh, I'm looking at Twitter because I have to do dumpster fire this week and I have to film or I have to write a blog." And I could find a way to justify it, but it's ultimately really drilling down and saying, "Yeah, but does that align with my values? Is that what I want to do? Am I just reacting? Like, dumpster fire's fun, don't get me wrong, I love it, but it's not like
So so
I want to do things that are aspirational. There's nothing in politics that I see that is aspirational at all.
I think it's like, you know, okay, what I'm hearing from you is that the two things that you're passionate about are stand up and doing some writing, creating art, creating stories. And okay, like let's say you were to do that and do that well, really well. Would anything come from that that is even more important than that, than the fact of just writing or just this doing stand up?
I don't know. I mean, it's weird. With stand up, my husband always jokes. He's like, what do you want from this? I'm like, truly nothing. Like, I want to be able to go work out all my material, but he's like, I don't understand this, like, for the love of the game. I'm like, I've come to accept that it is just something I have to do. It's the one area of my life that it feels completely ambitionless. I have no desire for a special. I have
I,
no,
I mean,
like,
and
it's just like, I want to
it's
do it.
it is okay. So Viktor Frankl would say, when you have found something that is so true and so pleasurable, then stop analyzing it. Just do it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like
Yeah.
we could analyze like, oh, why do you enjoy being such spending so much time with your kids? It's like, no, 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 no. Don't
Just do it.
overanalyze it. Just do it.
Yeah,
And
I love
so
that.
it's like, I think there is something about the in-person connectedness with an audience and bringing them all into like this alignment of joy, of laughter, of making fun
Mhm,
of taboos.
mhm.
It's like comedians are, the last truth tellers that we have, because you can get away with saying things that no one else can say, right? And you can do it in a way that where people, um, which I feel like it's also going to be the last place of free speech,
I think so,
the
though.
crucifixion of free speech, on y'all, right? Which is like, you are not allowed to make jokes about X, Y, and Z, and then it's like, no, that's where like somehow the humor is. Yeah,
I do think, though, that we went through a bit of that, and comedians actually, not all, but many of us held the line. I think there was a moment where it was like, "Oh gosh, there's really just a encroaching sense that you can't say this, you can't say that." But now in the comedy world, I'm seeing there's lots of
there's a
phases in comedy, and it's
yeah,
a big reaction. Kill Tony is massive. I think just seeing the kinds of comedy that's doing well in around town. It's a lot of like just saying things for the sake of shock and it's kind of low hanging fruit humor. Like, I don't think that it's very, I really like Colin Quinn, who's a freaking genius and manages to take something historical and brilliant. Like, he's so brilliant. I want a point of view. I want like a life. I love that kind of insight. I want
Oh
insight.
yeah.
I was saying
Yeah.
to my husband, like, I've been thinking about Rachel Feinstein. She has a new special out and it was hilarious. And I'm like, there's a couple of ways that I gauge how great a comedian is, but one of them is that I'll think about a bit nearly every time I'm doing something that bit might have been referencing. Like, she talks about being on a playground and just like pushing the swing and being like the way she experienced it.
Yeah.
And it's very
Yeah.
much the way I experience being on a playground sometimes. And every time now I think of that bit, or she talks about how a toddler can turn over a room like they're trying to like get out of their like they're trying to get out of their house because like some drug dealers are coming to find them. And so every time my toddler, so she that's the kind of stuff that I love in comedy. I don't, but there is a very I think the culture, men in particular, have really reacted to the past, 8 to 10 years or so of, for lack of a better term, like the kind of wokeism or whatever you want to call it, this very serious policing of words and deconstructing everything as problematic and intersectional, you know, power games and white privilege and all of this stuff. And now we're seeing the backlash to that in comedy in particular, a very large backlash.
Yeah, and I think that whenever I think it's kind of like this idea that the next generation will find the things that all the parents really care about, and they'll say, "No, we're going to do the opposite."
Right.
Um, it's like I had some parents as patients who were like, "I don't know what to do. My kids are watching Andrew Tate," you know, and it's like for the parents, this is like the worst thing ever, right? This
Yeah.
um, and if I have a kid that's doing that, I'll be curious about like, well, what does this mean? Like, what is grabbing your attention? Like, I'll be curious with them. Um, and lo and behold, for some of them, it's like, well, there's this, just masculinity or, that somehow I've never heard this word, like what it means to be masculine. And so I think, you know, just if you're a parent out there and you're listening to this and you're like, oh gosh, like I am all of these things, right? Your kids will be like, they'll find a way to be the opposite and to be like, okay, we're going to exert our independence, and comedy's kind of like that too, right? So comedy kind of
Right.
like, it's there to draw people back to like connectedness in our differences.
Right.
And I once wrote an essay on this in for one of those classes that you have to take at Berkeley, and my teacher didn't think it was very funny. But I was trying to explain that like actually comedy can bring people together in ways that without comedy you can't have, right? Because you
Yeah.
can laugh at like our differences. And I have like certain things that like if I make fun of it first before anyone else, it's like they don't have any power over me, And
Mhm.
so it's like, what if I were to make fun of those things? I don't know. It's like funny.
Are you tired of wading through media misinformation, trying to figure out a news outlet's spin or bias on any given story? If you're like me, you know that everyone has a slant, but Ground News is the solution. Ground News is the most complete news comparison app. It lets you make sense of the news on your own terms by letting you easily compare how a story is covered by different sources across the political spectrum and around the world. I know sometimes in America, we forget the other world exists. The other world, the rest of the world exists. That's how American centric I am. My father, I signed him up for it. He loves it because he's generally in his own media bubble and has now been using this to kind of sift through. There's a great feature, Blind Spot, that shows you, like, if you lean more left, here are the stories you probably missed in your silo. If you lean more right, here are the stories you missed from the left wing. Use our affiliate link and get 15% off. That's Ground News. Use the link below to get 15% off. I use it every day. I love it. If you love Watkins Welcome, please consider becoming a subscriber to Phetasy.com to show your support. Phetasy relies on its supporters to continue creating the content you love, so if you can, please support us. It truly keeps the lights on and the content churning. Churning? And it keeps me going. You also get a multitude of exclusive subscriber content, so come join us. Go check it out. Phetasy.com, Phetasy.com. What do you feel the most resistance around in your life? Like, as you know, when you talk about, like, do you want to write a book? Is it what is the thing that you, when you were referring earlier to feeling lots of resistance in all of this?
Okay. So for example, I wrote this academic paper and it took me like 3 to 4 years to put out, and it was on connection and how it was this study I did on connection and just how it was a measurement tool on like connectedness between two people. And like, I'm really passionate about this topic. For some reason, it's just so hard to like write on it. Like, it was
Mm.
like I don't know how to explain it. Another one I had was on micro expressions. So I studied these like very small 1/10 of a second flashes on the face that most people don't read. And I like stumbled upon this way to like videotape people's micro expressions. And then I created this app for it. It's now on a website, emotionconnection.com, but it teaches people how to read this. But
Oh, wow.
building that was so hard. I'll give it to you for free. And
I have a study I want you to do.
okay, go for it.
I believe you can probably predict whether or not a couple is going to end up divorced from their wedding pictures.
Okay. True study. It's already been done.
Okay.
It was done by Gottman, and it is one of my favorite. So like, there was this book that came out a couple years ago about this person that was like, micro expressions don't exist. Emotions are all
Mm,
culturally contingent. Like, it's not universal. It's like, no. You've never learned how to read micro expressions. Every
mhm,
culture has them. It's like flashes of
mhm,
the face. So like, anger is like down and together. So it's like a quick down and together of eyebrows is anger. Maybe like disgust is like, wrinkling around the nose and down together. Pain is a widening of the mouth and down and together. And
mhm.
so people go like that. Fear is just a widening of the mouth, like a quick,
That's
and
why.
like the eyebrows will come up and together, and then
Mhm.
sad, the inner side of the eyebrows just go up. Okay. So this is happening all the time in all conversations. I see it all the time. If you don't see it, it's like, once you see it, it's like you're seeing in color for the first time. Okay. So John Gottman looked at newly married couples and he videotaped them, and he looked at how many times they flashed these different emotions. And what he found was that he could predict to some degree future months of separation and physical illness by the amount of negative emotion that happened between the couple.
Wow.
I mean, physical illness. He was able to predict physical illness years later
Wow.
by
That's
the level
crazy.
of the connectedness. And I'll make this
Wow.
make sense to you. Is if you Okay, so they have these MRI machines. There's parts of your brain that light up in pain. So they stick a heat pad on you and they see how much pain in your brain is created. If you're sitting there and they heat this thing up to level 6, maybe you're 8 out of 10 pain. If you're holding the hand of a spouse and you have a great connection with them, that pain is like a couple degrees lower,
Mm.
lighting up lower in your brain. So your brain literally does not register the pain at the same level. Okay. If you're holding the hand of a spouse who you're not connected with, it's the same as if you were there alone.
This is the rage that's coming up right now is me thinking of all the people that died alone during COVID. Like, I still get
Oh,
randomly angry about this at least twice a day, and maybe that's just the I don't know. I will move myself to tears thinking about it. Um, and it comes up a lot, and I wasn't even someone who experienced I we did some Zoom things that were very sad and tragic, but it wasn't it, and I lost a lot of people in addiction that just never returned to meetings or died, or you went back to meetings and found out that they died. And that's another one where I get enraged. But like the people dying alone, when you tell me this, it's like
yeah.
I it
It's
makes me want to cry.
it's yeah, it's awful, right? And yeah, my mentor died in overseas. He died, and he was like, 93, and he was alone.
Mm,
And I had a last conversation with him where he was like, "I love you." And I'm like, I love you too, Dr. Tar." And yeah, it's that's what I imagine when I think about this idea of dying alone. It's like, no. Like I told his family, he told his family, "Don't come out to see me."
mhm,
And I told his wife, I'm like, "I think you should fly to go see him.
mhm.
I think this, like, you have to go." So I think, yeah, there were all sorts of weird rules that COVID fear brought about that were just insane.
Isn't it weird to see, like, the remnants of them around still? Like, I was even in Texas, where they were pretty open right away, but it was, like, the 6 feet apart with a Bud Light branding on it in this, like, little place that I went to. I was like, it's weird that or, like, the footsteps outside of the stores where you could stand. I don't there's something very, like, creepy and weird about those, like, relics of all of that that are still around in our society. I feel like they should be, like, spotless minded out, but they're still everywhere.
I still have patients who wash their food when they get it
Oh,
from the grocery
wow.
store. They, like, wash it in the sink with soap before they put it away. Despite me telling them that that was never a thing with COVID, um, I still probably the worst. Had a patient who just, like, would not leave home during
Yeah.
COVID, and I would go to his house, which is it's if you're a therapist and you're hearing this and you're like, you go to someone's house, I'm like, yeah, once in a while I break some rules, okay?
Yeah.
I'm a rebel. And I would sit 20 feet away from him outside, okay, if that makes you feel better. Um, and and we would have a conversation, and I was the
Mm.
only person that he saw
Wow.
face to face in a meaningful way.
Wow.
And this is someone who would look at his gun every morning and consider, is
Mm.
this the day?
Mhm,
You know?
mhm,
And
mhm.
so sometimes you just got to do what you got to do, to help out someone not die.
Is there truth My therapist and I were talking about this because, we were talking about the warning labels on drugs, antidepressants, and she said something that was so dark, and now, of course, I wanna turn it into a joke, but she was like, "Sometimes antidepressants give you just enough energy to get off the couch and kill yourself." And I don't mean to laugh at that
No,
because it's a nervous laughter, but I'm
yeah,
like, "That is so darkly hilarious," but also I can see it being 100% true. Like, she's like, "It gives you enough, like, motivation to
right.
to, like, go through with something that you were too lazy to go through."
That the so there is a black box label for kids who are, young, that the placebo, like, let's say the placebo increased the rate of suicidal thoughts to 1%.
Mhm,
So the sugar pill, so 1%
mhm,
of the kids were having suicidal thoughts. The antidepressants, SSRIs, will go to 2%.
mhm,
So, there's a question of, like, well, why does that happen? And sometimes when you start an antidepressant, you get a little bit more anxious for the first couple weeks, and then that anxiety decreases at around week 6. Okay. So that could be the reason. But it's not suicidal completions. So there's no studies that show that increases suicidal completions, only
Okay.
suicidal thoughts. So, I think you had sent me this thing of like, do mass shooters have higher rates of antidepressant use, anti-anxiety meds?
Right.
And I sent you, there's been databases on this. And
Mhm.
I remember as a resident hearing this online, and it deeply affected me. And I was like, oh shoot, are we giving something that like is making mass shooters? Like, and I remember like, how would I figure this out? And I heard a talk by a forensic psychiatrist back then. And he said basically that what he had worked with a lot of mass shooters in a lot of these cases. And he said a lot of the times you'll find some blog will say, oh, this person was on this antidepressant. And then that gets repeated many times. But the
Mm.
person wasn't really on the antidepressant. And he knew because he was in the actual court case, where they looked
Oh.
through all the medical records and he saw all the prescriptions that were ever written for this person.
Okay.
And so there's a database where they've looked at this, and these are not psychiatrists. These are not people who are paid by pharma. So let me just put that out there for all of you people who think we're all paid by pharma. By the way, I've never accepted $1 by pharma. And you can look that up. You can look up every psychiatrist, by the way, and how much money they received from a pharma company.
Oh,
But,
wow.
but because of my podcast, and because of my scrupulosity, I've stayed 100% no drug dinners for Dr. Puder, no steaks. Um, okay, so getting back to the mass shooting, there were people that had been on psychiatric meds or who had been on psychiatric meds in the past. But when you look at the full list of psychiatric meds, it's like 40 out of 200, and there's no pattern. I'm
Mm.
not looking at them and I'm not saying, oh, they're all the same class of medication. They're all over the place. And we know that people who are um, severely ill, people who have who get red flagged, right? Like a lot of teachers will say after a shooting, it's like, oh, I always felt like this weird feeling with that guy, like something was off. So a lot of these people end up in therapy or in mental health for whatever reason, um, just to kind of a visit or two, or like, they're trying to figure out what's going on with this person. And so some of them do get put on some things, but there's no like pattern. And I would add, when you look at actually like mental illness diagnosis, right? Like how many of them have like psychosis? It's like somewhere around like 6% have like a severe mental illness. Now,
Mhm.
when I said that publicly, people were like, how could you say these people aren't mentally ill? There's something really wrong with them. And I would say, absolutely, there's something wrong. Is it a formal mental illness like bipolar or schizophrenia or major depression? No. It's often deeper. And so this is where I would say psychoanalysis or psychodynamic therapy would say, like, there are personality disorders exist, and there's a spectrum of functionality. And these people are probably lower on that spectrum of functionality. And those types of people have a lot more like black and white thinking. They
Mhm.
may take the awful feeling that they feel inside and project it on the world, and then try to get it back from the world. It's like, I hate myself. I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to take down everyone as well because they're all evil and assholes. And, so it's kind of like this. It's often these things are suicidal, homicidal, co-occurring events where they are exerting their misery and their suffering.
Why are there so many of them?
There aren't, though.
Oh.
200 or so in the last 30 years. I mean, this is very rare. So the other thing,
Why does it feel like it's not very rare?
because of the media, because it's so awful, because of the shock value.
Mm.
There's studies that show that the people that want the notoriety, they try to do something new. They try to do it in a shocking way. They try to do it in a new way. They copycat a little bit, but they also shock.
I can't
And
even look at it. It's like one of the every time it happens, I wanna turn away, and that was before I even had a kid, and now I can't. And I read, like, some horrific interview about Parkland that described in detail, like, the parents finding out that I still think about to this day. And after the new what is the Connecticut one, Newtown or whatever, that I literally left America. Like, I got on a plane and I was like, I can't even face this. It just was too, I don't know, it's just I find it so upsetting. So it feels to me, and I think this was something that
okay,
it
and let me say, like 200 or so events is still 100% horrible. But the homicide rate in the U.S. is like 6 to 10 per 100,000 people per year.
Mhm,
The the mass shooter is like 6 per billion people. Okay.
mhm, mhm.
So we're talking about like a very, very small fraction of how people actually die. But it's like if you talk to someone who's a teenager, and this is not something that we faced. I bet we didn't face when we were, I don't know. I didn't face. I'm a little bit older than you.
I don't think
I
so.
I
I bet
didn't
I'm
go
older
through
than you.
I didn't go through school fearing a mass shooting ever. Did
No,
you?
I didn't either. It was, when did Columbine happen? 98, 99.
Okay. I'm not sure.
I'm not exactly sure, I can look it up. I should know the
But
year
did you go
because
through high school fearing a mass shooting?
no, God, no, I
Okay.
graduated in '97.
There's studies that like 70% of students actively think about this once in a while, like, and fear it happening.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a thing that happens.
But okay, for how rare of an of an of a thing, you know? Like,
Right,
okay, so number 1, I'm not saying that it's not a horrible, horrible thing. It's absolutely, and, like, it's hard to even study this. But the pure, and I would say once
99.
again, like, I can fear something. Like, my best friend lived 2 doors down from the San Bernardino shooter.
Right.
So if you remember the San Bernardino shooter, it was this awful event, and I
Yeah,
treated some of the people who survived, who were in that massacre, who had dead bodies on top of them. So I actually psychologically treated those people. So
wow.
there's an emotional side of me that after that, when I would go around town, I would park myself in a way that if someone came through the door, I would be able to, take the table, put it up as a battering ram, charge them, right? I
Yeah.
literally would think about that when I was in public places. Okay, so
I
that's the
think a
emotional
lot of
side of
men
me.
think about this all the time, no matter what, by the way.
So that's like
There
the
are all these
logical.
memes online about this of, like, women there's on Instagram, you'll see it all the time, like, my husband planning his escape and how to defend us in any situation, and me just like, "La, la, la," checked out completely. But go
Yeah.
on. That's the emotional part.
So the logical part, is like, you know, y you'd probably be more likely to be killed by a shark attack,
Yeah, I
which
mean, it's
is like
actually
so
like
many.
fearing a plane crash, it is like it seems like it's a similar thing where it's so rare, and then people will literally every flight they take, they will be
Yes,
afraid.
yes, but I would say a being shot in a school is a lot more rare than a plane crash.
Mm,
But see, the, because it's so horrific, everyone is gonna be publicized. And
mhm,
and and I think one of the big ways to overcome this as a society is to stop talking about the person that did it and start talking
right,
about the heroes that usually ended the person's life.
right.
Talk about the heroes, talk about that, you know. Um, but then nowadays with media, with new media, you're always gonna get someone who like, on TikTok is gonna find out about the killer and post it, and it's like that is like it's like staring at the snake in the jungle. It's like the ape just staring at the snake for hours, like, come over here, all my buddies. Let's stare at this snake together because it's the one
Ugh,
thing that could kill us.
it's
And
so
so,
wild, like, the times we live in. I really wanna have you on, like, monthly and to talk about, like,
Oh, you're kind.
everything.
You're kind. Let me mention one thing about COVID, because this is where, like, I couldn't say this during COVID, but it was October the first year of COVID, and I read this study that said that my chance of dying at my age and my health was the same as driving an hour a day for a commute for a year. And once I read that study, I was like, I wouldn't be afraid of driving an hour a day for a commute.
Right,
So why are we upending our lives?
right,
But see, this
and
is
that
like the rationality, like emotional rationality divide. And this is how media can blow up one issue and make us completely forget about, like, oh yeah, coronary artery disease is actually what kills like the majority of Americans. And by the
mhm,
way, a ton of the processed food you're eating is probably going to get you there faster.
mhm.
And your lack of exercise. It's like that we will forget about, we won't care about. Let's care about this thing that kills 6 per billion people.
It is weird, it's like my kind of fascination with, what is it? Oh my gosh, behavioral economics. Like, I am obsessed with behavioral economics because we make no logical sense at all, at
Yep.
all. There's
Yep.
nothing that generally people do when it comes to, like, making sense of their money and how they're spending their money is logical. Some people are very good at it, obviously, but I think the majority of us, especially those of us that didn't have rich dad, poor dad, like we had the poor dad, where you're buying your lotto tickets and you're somebody again, this is where I love memes because
Mm.
they are the modern art that just
Yep.
penetrates so many truths. There was one that was like me after, like refusing to pay $25 for a bag, getting my $30 worth of food at the airport or whatever. Like we make no sense at all. But I'm
Right.
obsessed with these studies that they do on people.
And sometimes humor can cut through and change people faster than anything else. I would say humor in my practice, it's like Dr. Tara was like, be careful of cracking a joke because it could, just be careful. Okay. I can't help myself. Once in a while, like something like something is just like, it's going to be bringing some humor to the situation just makes sense,
Yeah, I
you
can't
know?
tell you how many times I've made jokes and my therapist has gone, I shouldn't laugh at this, but because I'll be making jokes about something. I'll be crying making a joke and she's like, I shouldn't laugh, but that's pretty funny. Like I'm very sensitive of your time. So
Yeah.
I could go like Rogan length podcast with you, but I'm gonna
Uh,
ask you, there's so much I wanna cover with you just all the time because you are awesome. But, yeah, maybe we can do you ever come through Austin?
um, I rarely travel just because I have kids and like I'm like full, like when I'm not working, I'm full like
Dad.
parental dad
Mhm.
thing. But like maybe in the future, right? And I think it's like, it's not that far away. It's only a couple hour drive or a couple hour
Are
flight.
you near Disney World?
Yeah,
We
very
might
neat.
we might be I'm trying to, like now that I have a kid, everyone's like, "Let's do this group." My cousins are all like, "We should all meet in Florida for spring break or something."
Yeah.
So, if I'm there,
Well,
I'll let you know.
if you're there, come out with your husband. We'll get a steak, and or like there's a sushi place that's out of this
Yeah.
world out here. Like it's like next level. So whatever you guys like to eat food wise, Orlando is amazing.
What is your biggest defect of character?
Defective, my like the
Defect of character.
my defective character.
Yeah, whatever comes I mean, and
Oh
I'm sure
man,
it's
that's how you
ever
want to end.
changing.
I got like 2 minutes left here.
No,
Um,
asset, I'll end with the
yeah,
asset,
okay.
but I always
I
start with I end on a high note, don't worry.
I would say um the I have I would say my internal critic is very loud, and I would say through years of therapy, it's softer. But it's I would say if there's a character, when I think of character, I think of like things that would stop me from achieving like goals. And I would
Mm,
say like the volume on that thing in college was like very, very loud, or throughout medical
yeah.
school. But it probably drove me to like work so hard to get to where I am. But at the same time, it's like, it's very loud.
Do you think it goes down as like the oxytocin goes up as a guy gets older?
I think I'll tell you, like, so one time I got a ticket, because I don't know if you know what it means, like punitive self, like criticalness or whatever. I got a ticket, and I was going to change insurances because I had moved to California, and I realized that my previous insurance didn't have um they didn't register the ticket. So when I
Oh,
went to go renew with them, like I told them, like, hey, I think you should charge me more. But before that happened, I couldn't sleep for a couple nights because of that like critical internal
wow.
voice that I was like tempted to report to a new insurance company that I had no tickets. Like
What is Go
that's
on.
different, right?
Yeah, that is.
Yeah.
What's your biggest asset?
Asset, I would say, um, I would say that I get really, I would say for like what I do as a podcaster, like the psychiatry podcast, it's like I get really passionate about topics, and I'll like really want to wrap my head around it. And I really enjoy like the connecting with the people, like connecting with people who know a lot about different things.
Mhm.
So I would say like I the connection, like I think because of my own developmental childhood stuff, which I'll have to break down another visit um, with my future therapist here. Uh, I would say connection is like, it's like it's like dopamine. And so when
Mm.
I like when therapy is going well and I'm doing good therapy, I really enjoy it.
Mhm.
And I think that makes me a good therapist, because
Mhm.
when I'm really connected and excited about that, and that's what's going to help the person, it goes really well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Where can we find you?
You can't. I hide pretty well.
No,
No,
you don't.
I would say, well, I mean, online you can find me, but other than that, no,
Well,
I'm in,
yeah, I mean online, not in real life.
I'm trying to be
Not
funny.
asking for
I'm
your
like,
address, doctor.
I, yeah, if you just Google David Puder, Puder, you'll be able to find me wherever you're at. And online, I'm on Instagram or TikTok.
Okay.
I'm not really active on TikTok. It's mostly
We're
Instagram and
too old for
Twitter.
TikTok.
I blew up for a while, and then I just lost all interest.
I feel like it's also where, like, someone was like, "No, it's your duty to be on there to help the youth," and I'm like, "Is it though?"
Yeah, I it's the algorithm is too strong for me. I can't go there.
It's too powerful.
It's too powerful. Okay,
Oh, we
so
could talk all about this stuff.
yeah,
Um,
I have a practice in Florida, California, Texas, and I have different people that work for me who are really good too. So
okay.
yeah,
What do they do, like, just like therapy?
most therapy, psychiatry, um, cash pay,
Okay.
yeah, and then the podcast, psychiatry and psychotherapy podcast. If you just look up psychiatry, you'll see me.
Okay.
Yeah.
This
All
has been
right.
a pleasure.
The check-in with Bridget and cousin Maggie can now be found at Phetasy.com. It's been titled Another Round with Bridget Phetasy, and it's now in video.
This has been Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you're welcome. It's the dumbest line.